Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Stogie Review video review. I am Walt White, back once again for another short Ashes review. And this video is actually going to also serve as sort of a primer for the famous Cigar Expo. It is Friday morning. I'll be leaving here to head up to Famous Smoke Shop in several hours. A little bit later this afternoon. And just sort of going to talk about some of the things I intend on doing, maybe some of the people who are going to be there, and while I do that, take a look at a cigar that I've reviewed in the past. This cigar never got a formal review, although it was one of the cigars that were that was done in a blind cigar tasting that I did over at my local shop with a bunch of the guys. And it is the Aurora 1495 Connoisseur Selection Connecticut Wrapped. And basically all that means is that the Connoisseur line was developed so that binder and filler were the same across all of the cigars. And the only change was the wrapper. And the objective here was to show the smoker that there is a vast difference in flavor. All you need to do is change the wrapper. And to give everyone an idea of how vast that flavor change was, they come out with the Connoisseur Selection, which consists of a Connecticut, a Sumatra, a Cameroon, a Corojo, and I believe there's one more and it's slipping my mind. I don't have the list in front of me, I'm just sort of winging it. But at any rate, there are, this is part of the Connoisseur Selection. This is actually one of the leftovers from that tasting that I did. It was one of the two I had left over that didn't pop the band off of, and I just kind of stumbled across it this morning, looking for something that would be fairly mild. And I was actually considering going with a San Cristobal by Ashton, but I started thinking about it, and you know what, the expo is today, it starts today, you know, there's going to be dinner, drinks, cigars, probably more cigars and even more cigars after that, so I don't want to go blowing out my palate early, so I want to start and ease into the day. And start with something fairly mild. I mean, I expect this to be mild to medium, but that's kind of beside the point at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing started. And just like just about every La Aurora cigar I've seen, I've got a hole in the filler. And I actually got a little bit of information about that not that long ago, and just want to let it focus so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see there's a hole in the filler, and I inquired about that during one of the La Aurora events I went to. Actually, it was a La Aurora tasting, and one of the things that was mentioned was that it's actually from the draw tester. Apparently, it has a needle on the end of it, and before the wrapper is applied in the cap, it gets this needle pressed into it so that it can draw air through it and take a reading. And anytime I see that in a La Aurora product, it means that it's been draw tested, and that's sort of the mark of the draw tester from what I understand. Now, La Aurora is the only manufacturer I've seen where it's very prominent. I mean, I've seen little what look like pin pricks or needle, like a small needle was inserted, but some of these get fairly large. So I'm not quite sure if their draw tester is different from anyone else's, or if they are one of the few people that really do draw test practically every cigar, and I just notice it on their stuff far more often than anyone else. But that hole aside, cigar looks pretty good. It doesn't have a real oily appearance. It sort of has a matte sheen to it. Veins are medium in size, I suppose, and they feel as though they were pressed out. And they don't have a lumpy, raised sort of feel to them. Despite some of the sizes, they are fairly smooth to the touch. The wrapper looks to be kind of toothy, lots of little dimples. The color consistency is good. The cap looks to be neatly applied, and I'm not seeing anything that's jumping out at me as a flaw. So far it looks good. So. The aroma on both the head and foot is pretty muted. I'm not really getting anything out of it. And despite what I expected, from that hole. The draw actually has a little bit of firmness to it, a little more so than I typically like. It's a little firm, but it's really not that bad. And it's got a floral flavor to it. It's like a sweet floral flavor to it from the start. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my cigar lit. I'll be right back. I want to pull up the famous Cigar Expo information and maybe talk about that a little bit as I go along with my cigar. So until then, sit tight and I'll be right back. Alright, well, I am back and plugging right along on my La Aurora 1495 Connoisseur Selection Connecticut. And as you can see, the ash is a little on the dark side. The burn line is kind of thick, a little ragged. But the cigar seems to be doing pretty well. The ash hasn't been making much of a mess. I mean, there's a couple of random flakes that seem to fall off of the cigar every now and again. But no big clumps yet, and it seems fairly strong. And took a little bit of effort, but I was able to break it free. The draw still has a little bit of resistance to it, but it's got a nice heavy volume of smoke that comes along with it. It's cool. It doesn't seem to overheat with any excessive draws on the cigar. The finish is not really drawn out. It's got a lingering sort of spiciness to it, which is interesting. And I'm not getting much in terms of creaminess. I think that the strong black coffee I'm drinking may be washing away some of that creaminess. But I've had a number of these before, so I'm not really concerned about drinking it with coffee. Plus, it's a short ashes, so I can cheat and not have to drink it with water. So, body. It's mild to medium. And in the flavor department, I always found these cigars kind of odd. And what I mean by that is it just, they taste kind of off. And what I mean when I say kind of off is, so you have these blanks, 4 or 5, whatever the case may be, and they're all rolled the same. They're filler and binder, no wrapper, no cap. And you know, you've got a bunch of guys grabbing a blank and putting a wrapper on it, and you know, it's 4 or 5 different wrapper leaves on this one generic blank. Now, I gotta think that, at least I think that cigars are designed or blended in such a way that they're meant to hold a certain wrapper leaf. If you put the wrong one on, they sort of taste like this. It's not that they're unsmokable or they taste really bad. They just seem to have mismatched flavor profiles. Like something just strikes you odd about the cigar. I believe it's the Cameroon in this line that I think is phenomenal. It's almost like the blend was made to go specifically well with that Cameroon leaf. I think it's even better than the Sumatra, which was the original. In this case, it's still got a very nice Dominican tobacco core flavor. It's got a very rich undertone. It's just a very rich tobacco undertone to it, and the Connecticut leaf on top of that seems to give it sort of a dry, nutty, and woody sort of flavor, and it just seems kind of off. And I'm kind of struggling to put it towards why it seems off. But every time I smoke one of these cigars, I just get the impression that something is off about it. And then if I light up the Cameroon or the Corojo, I think it's far better, and the match is much closer than what it should be. You know, when you light up the Cameroon, you get more of a sort of fruity, spicy flavor out of it. And I think that flavor matches the core flavor much better than this cigar does. So this one always seems to me like it's a little mismatched. But different strokes for different folks. You know, they wouldn't be creating the cigar if it didn't sell. So obviously people like it, and I do like it. It just seems kind of off to me, and that always kind of pops up in the back of my mind that I'm smoking a cigar that seems off. It seems as though the wrong wrapper leaf is on this cigar, but it is what it is. So there's the first third. Back to a little more expo talk. I'm in the process, actually let's talk about what's going to happen today. Probably not long from right now, they're going to be getting the annual golf tournament underway. And I don't know whether cigar people are involved in that, or manufacturers are involved, or if it's strictly retail customers and whatnot. And I'll be missing that. I'm not a golfer, and sort of running around on the greens with my camera seems a little odd, and don't want to be doing that. So I'm going up later this afternoon. There's a dinner tonight which has most, if not all, of the manufacturers involved. And I believe there's a cigar menu that goes along with the dinner, which is going to be pretty interesting, and I'm really looking forward to that. Later on, the fight between Pete Johnson and the former famous employee has been canceled. I think his name was Tim, but I'm not positive. I really don't remember. But anyway, that fight was canceled because the opponent no longer works for Famous, and instead Larry Holmes is going to be doing exhibition fights. He's bringing, I think it's 3 fights, 3 2-minute rounds, something like that, and it's supposed to be pretty interesting. They'll be handing out cigars at that event as well. Camacho Cigars was sponsoring it to begin with, so Pete Johnson will be giving away, I think, 3 cigars, as will Camacho. So rather than get 2 sticks like you were originally going to, you're getting 6. And it's sort of a Camacho versus Tatuaje theme, and it seems very interesting. There's also a lingerie show by Bare Elegance, which I'm not sure whether that takes place before or after the fight. And I'm in the middle of trying to get information on whether or not I can have my camcorder handy. Not that they're going to be walking around with cigars, but it's part of the expo. I would like to be able to have my camcorder at the ready, just in case there's something of interest to record. And it would be completely understandable if it was sort of off, if that tent was off limits to any sort of recording. So I'm in limbo on whether or not I'm going to be able to do any reporting on that, aside from just typing you up a report or maybe snapping a couple of pictures, if that's even allowed. I really don't know what I'm permitted to do and what I'm not permitted to do. I guess I'll find out soon enough this afternoon when I go up there and start talking to people. The expo is tomorrow, and it's basically, from the video I've seen of last year's event, it's just a massive tent event kind of a thing, where you've got a number of manufacturers giving out samples, talking to people, and it appeared to be a very good time from last year's video. Gary Korb from, I always want to say Gary Arts from 601, but it's Gary Korb from Cigar Advisor, Famous Smoke Shop, copywriter, was doing some recording last year, and I watched both videos on YouTube, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I just hope it doesn't get too hot and too humid or rains, because the whole event is outdoors at the Famous location. So that's what I've got to look forward to. I'll tell you a little bit about what I plan on doing when I come back. I'll probably come back one more time, because I realized at the time when this video is getting very long. So I'm going to smoke a little bit more cigar, do a little more conversing on Twitter with Ryan Hewitt, Jerry Cruz, and a number of other cigar people. And I'll be back. We'll take a look at the second half of the cigar and wrap things up, and I'll let you be on your way. Alright, well, I'm back. It's about time to wrap up my La Aurora 1495 Connecticut. And it's doing pretty well in the excuse me, in the construction department. Despite that hole in the back, which I really thought was going to loosen up the draw too much, it's got a bit of resistance to it. It's not overly easy to overdraw on the cigar. It's getting a little warm, but it's really not that bad. The ash is nice and strong. Again, I'm getting a few flakes here and there falling off the cigar and making a little bit of a mess, but I haven't had that big chunk fall yet, which is really what my issue is. I don't mind the little pieces every now and again, but those big hot chunks that have burned my fingers and shirts and things like that tend to bother me a little bit when they suddenly drop. In this case, it's been nice and strong. The burn line is still a little heavy, and it's not as wavy anymore as it was. But I've got just a little bit of blistering going on in spots. The finish is still a little on the dry side. It's nice and smooth. There's a little bit of an aggressive tingle on sort of like the opposite ends of my tongue, the far sides. But aside from that, you know, it's been nice and smooth, easy going, and very enjoyable as a first cigar in the morning. Actually, I got started a little after 8, I believe, and I've been at this for nearly 2 hours. So it's a nice slow smoke, and all in all, you know, I enjoyed it. The flavor profile hasn't changed up much. It's been pretty consistent. I'm getting mostly this rich tobacco flavor, but I'm still getting this nutty and woody component, and actually a little bit of a peppery bite. Leaning a little more towards the heat of like a pepper sauce or whatever it is, and it's sort of hitting me in the back of the throat. Not in an irritating manner, but I feel a little bit of that heat, which is interesting. The nutty flavors and that sort of woody flavor seems to come on a little bit stronger toward the end, and that core natural tobacco flavor seems to settle. And I really like it better at this point when those lighter, more airy flavors seem to come forward. And there's even a little bit of a sweetness, but it's really difficult to pick out, and I'm getting it every once in a while. All in all, you know, I really enjoyed the cigar, but I still think it tastes a little off. Again, and I think it's just because this cigar wasn't intentionally made to carry a Connecticut wrapper. They just happened to create the connoisseur line and put one on there just to show you what different wrappers would do. And as a result, I think the flavors are a little off, almost as if it's a little out of balance. But all in all, a nice cigar. I'm not positive what the price point is on these. The only ones my local shop carries are the Sumatra line, and I think those run almost $7 for a Robusto. So I'd imagine the connoisseur line is going to be somewhere around there. Excuse me. There may be a little bit of fluctuation using the different wrapper leaves, bringing the price up and down. Obviously, sometimes, most of the time, Cameroons tend to be more expensive than Corojo, and you know, Connecticut shade wrappers, whether or not they're actually Connecticut or Ecuadorian, make a difference in what the final price is and things like that. So I would imagine around $7. I wouldn't think it would be more than $7.50, but again, that's just here in Pennsylvania with an MSRP not carrying state taxes or things like that. But one of the things I forgot to mention about the Cigar Expo, one of the really nice things was Rocky Patel stepped up and decided to cover a shuttle bus, and he's sponsoring this shuttle bus that is going to be going from the event to the 2 hotels that were recommended by the Cigar Expo, or Famous. So I'll be able to drive up to the hotel, and hopefully the shuttle bus is running early enough when I get there that I can just hop on it and ride over to Famous, and not have to drive to Famous and then drive back and then hop on this shuttle bus. You know, there's going to be a lot of booze, a lot of food, and a lot of camaraderie. So I really do expect people to be in high spirits from a few drinks. And it was really nice to see that something like that was covered. I was a little concerned going up there, thinking that, you know, there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of us going from the event to our hotels, which are, you know, a few minutes away. My hotel's, I looked it up on MapQuest, like 10 minutes away. So it's nice to know I can hop on a shuttle bus and it'll take us right back to where our hotel is. Aside from that, you know, one of the things that I learned at IPCPR was that we needed to do a lot of work, and we needed to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Because a lot of these manufacturers, they didn't have a ton of time to give us. And I applied that same principle to Cigar Fest. And as a result, I didn't get to have a cigar with a lot of the people that I wanted to. There were a number of people that came up and introduced themselves, and I would have loved to have been able to sit down and have a cigar with them and just hang out. And I didn't really get a chance to do that since I was trying to work so much at Cigar Fest. And this time around, I'm going to do the opposite. I do plan on getting several videos shot, talking to a lot of the manufacturers, but I'm going to be making more of an effort to be available, whether I'm just sitting at a table, you know, smoking a cigar, having a drink, or what the case may be. You know, I kind of want to mingle and have more of a good time with some of the people that know the website and know me. I know there are several that are going to be at the expo, and I hope to have, you know, at least part of a cigar and a beer with most, if not all of them. So I'm really expecting it to be a good time, you know, outdoors. it may be a little warm, but aside from that, you know, I really expect it to be a good time. Cigar Fest was really compacted and tight, and a lot of people in that tight space, and it was just, you know, it was kind of tiresome to try to wade your way through people, and yeah, I really hope being outdoors resolves that issue, and the Cigar Expo becomes more laid back and relaxed. So that's what's going on at the Expo. That's what I'm planning on doing, and that's my Short Ashes take on the La Aurora 1495 Connoisseur Selection Connecticut, which is a mouthful, but it's a decent cigar, and I really enjoyed it. So with that said, I got to start packing up. I'll be leaving in a couple of hours, and the camcorder that I'm talking into needs to be packed up and charged, and actually I need to go find HD tapes for it. Otherwise, the video is going to be a little bit lower quality, because I'm going to need to go with DV tapes instead of HD. So that's all I've got for you. So sit tight, and keep an eye out on the website for Cigar Expo video to pop up. I'm not quite sure when we're going to get to it. Hopefully I'll be able to relax a little bit in the evening and stream a couple of those videos to the computer and get those uploaded and whatnot. So keep an eye on the site, and until next time, happy smoking.